Good evening and welcome to Dome at Home. It's June the 17th. This is our last show before the solstice, and we're pretty happy to be here. I'm Scott Young, broadcasting from Treaty 1 territory in the homeland of the Métis Nation right here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Good to see you all today. Nice to see so many people in the chat. We're excited about today's show. It's the second last show of season 2. And so we're going to be talking about the solstice. There's been a bunch of cool space stuff that has happened even just today. I don't know if you've been following the news, but we've got 3 new astronauts in space on a brand new space station. The Chinese space station's up there. We'll take a look at that, talk about the astronauts that are up there. And of course, all the regular stuff, what's up in the sky, what you can see and things like that. We are going to be gearing up for our summer season number 3, which is going to launch on Canada Day. So basically, we're just gonna keep going here. I'm getting a couple of requests to turn me up, and I'm not sure why. My microphone was sagging a bit. How about I do that? That a little better? Hopefully that will help. Okay, so we're gonna get into things. With me, as always, is Mike. Mike, not this Mike, but the other Mike. Oh, that would have been a great thing. People were asking to see you on camera, Mike, and I could have just brought you up like this. Oh, missed opportunity. How you doing, Mike?
Not too bad, Scott. How are you doing?
Peachy. We have lots of good folks out there. Mike will be moderating the chat and answering or queuing up the questions for our Q&A session at the end of the show. And yeah, let's get right into things. Let's get over to the sky. There we go. All right. So evening sky, sun is still up, still a beautiful evening if you have a chance to get outside. Once the sun goes down, we start to be able to see the stars. And as it gets dark, even before it gets dark, you'll probably notice that the moon is up there. This is the week of the first quarter moon coming up, and we're just a couple of days before first quarter. So what that means is our moon is, oops, there we go. Actually looks pretty much like first quarter right now, actually. Oh, with the time zone. There we go. Still getting requests for volume. I'm not sure why, because we did sound check this before. I will turn up the gain on the microphone. There we go. Is that a little better? Hopefully that will work. I'm not sure what's going on there. Okay, so we're coming up to first quarter moon. The first quarter moon is visible after sunset and is nice and easy to see. It's nice and high in the sky, and we're pretty much at that point where we have half of the moon lit up by the sun. And you can always tell which side of the moon is going to be lit up because it's the side that is facing towards the sun, basically. If we zoom out here, the sun is over on the right of the moon, and so it'll be the right side of the moon that's lit up. So here we are, first quarter. From now until a week from now, you basically find out that the moon gets to full moon, and that's when the moon is really sort of lighting up the whole sky. And it makes it harder to see some of the stars, actually. The moon is so bright, it washes out a lot of the fainter stars. So right around now, it's a good time to be looking at the sky because the moon is up there, you can look at it, but it's not so bright that it's overpowering. We're going to get a little darker here. I just saw go by in the chat, somebody was talking about showing somebody Venus. Venus is out there right after sunset. If you get out right after the sun goes down, it's the first star you'll see at night, nice and bright. And the only downside with Venus is that it is very low on the horizon. If you've got trees and buildings, your neighbor's fence, anything like that in the way, this is very, very close to the horizon. And of course, as the sky darkens, we wind up getting even less visibility. The planet becomes easier to see, but it becomes lower and lower because the sun sets just this, or Venus sets just like the sun did. By about, probably 10:30 or so, Venus is down too low to see. Mars is still hanging around over there. The Mars and Venus have gotten pretty close together. The two of them will pass in early July, but Mars is so faint. I've pretty much written off Mars for a couple of months now. It's so faint, so far away, and so low in the sky that it's just not worth looking at. We are near the solstice, the summer solstice, the official start of summer, at least the astronomical start of summer, whatever that is. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the main thing, oh, hey, Abby and Kylo, nice to see you. The main thing about the solstice is that the sun sets very late and the sun rises very early. We have really, really long daytime hours and we have really, really short nighttime hours. In fact, technically, right now, there is no night. We only get into what's called twilight. That's sort of the sky's kind of dark, but not fully dark because the sun is just below the horizon. That's that transition zone between daytime and then sunset and then nighttime. We actually never get out of twilight in the solstice period because the sun, when it goes down below our horizon, actually does not go very far below the northern horizon. It only goes a little bit below here. So there's always a bit of a glow. Even at midnight, if we fast forward to midnight, you're still going to see a little bit of a glow in the northern part of the sky. So we don't have great opportunities for looking at the stars, but we do have great opportunities for summer because, I mean, everybody likes summer. One of the great things of Manitoba, the summers kind of mostly make up for the winters. Over in the west, we still have our old favorites. We've got Arcturus, the bright star over here that is attached to the ice cream cone shape or the necktie shape of Boötes, the herdsman. Over in the northwest, the Big Dipper is actually sort of starting to get lower here. I guess I've gone a little bit late into the evening. There we go. We'll sort of stay about there. Sort of at an angle over in the northwest, you've got the Big Dipper, the handle up near the top. There we go. And then you've got the bowl over here, and the two pointer stars in the end of the bowl point over to your North Star, so you can always find your directions at night. We've talked about that many times in the past. Right now, the moon, first quarter moon, is over in the constellation of Virgo. Virgo is a tough constellation to see. I don't know why people insist on calling right when the show's on. Anyway, Virgo is a tough constellation to see. This is supposed to be Virgo here, and it doesn't really look like a maiden or much of anything, I don't think. But the moon moves right through it. And so for the next couple of nights, the moon will actually be in the constellation of Virgo. Tonight here, tomorrow over here, and then the next night over here. Right about here is a beautiful, fairly bright star called Spica, the brightest star in Virgo. The cool thing about Spica, it's actually blue colored, but you only notice the color when you got something else to compare it to, and there's nothing normally around there. Well, the next few nights, the moon will be there, and the moon is that bright sort of yellowy white color. So you'll have a contrast to be able to show you the blue color of Spica. So get out in the next couple of nights, try and see if you can see that color for Spica. If you have binoculars, those will give you a better view. The binoculars help you see the colors of stars a little bit more. Swinging around to the south, we are getting into Milky Way season. We talked a little bit about this the other day. I'm just going to change the shape of my horizon here so that our constellations look a little happier. There we go. That's a bit better. Down on the southern horizon, we have two constellations coming up that are really hard to see. They're always very low, but they're kind of cool. This is Scorpio the Scorpion, and it's got one really bright star, Antares, the red heart of the scorpion there. And then over here, this is Sagittarius the Archer. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit because that's supposed to look like a centaur archer. So half man, half horse with a bow and arrow. No idea. To me, it looks like a teapot. You've got, your teapot here with the lid, and there's the handle, and here's the spout. And actually, if you look really carefully, you can see some steam coming out of the teapot. That's the Milky Way. The Milky Way basically goes from Sagittarius, and it goes all the way up the sky, pretty much straight across the sky to the Summer Triangle, which is a group of stars we talked about last week. 3 bright stars that look kind of like a giant slice of pizza in the sky. So basically, the southern and eastern sky right now, that's where the Milky Way is. With the moon, a little bit hard to see. And in the city, a little bit hard to see. But we're pointing it out because as we get into the summer and as we get into another dark of the moon coming up in about 3 weeks, we're going to want to come back to the Milky Way. So get to know that region of the sky. It'll help you out. Over in the north and east, we start to already see some of the autumn constellations. Constellations like the ones that we started off with back at the beginning of the show. In January, they were just setting in the west. Well, now here we are in the summertime, they're rising in the east. Ones like Cassiopeia the Queen, or the W. Pegasus the Flying Horse is just rising up over here. Andromeda the Princess, that whole epic Clash of the Titans story with Perseus and the Medusa and all that stuff. That's in the sky, and that'll be rising up. So if you get up really early in the morning, that's a great time to see those constellations. We talk about the stars of summer as if you can only see summer stars in the summer. Those are the ones that are best viewed sort of in the early evening when it gets dark. Those are the ones that most people are used to. But if you stay up late, you can actually see next season's stars and get sort of a preview of the sky. All right. Before we get into our sun and solstice kind of thing, I do want to jump forward to the morning sky. I saw something go by in the chat asking about some of the planets. And right now, some of the planets are in the morning sky. So we're just going to zap forward. We're about 2 in the morning right now, which is either really early or really late, depending on your point of view. Actually, it's kind of right in that transition zone. I don't know if I would stay up until 2 in the morning or if I would get up at 2 in the morning. Anyway, that's when Jupiter and Saturn rise. They're over in the southeast. They're the brightest things rising in the sky. You've got Jupiter on the left and you've got Saturn on the right. They are going to be visible all summer long. So this is sort of, again, we're getting kind of the preview of them because they're kind of over in the autumn sky, but we can see it early in the morning here. If we jump ahead a number of days here, the moon is going to pop into that part of the sky. Here we are on the 24th, the 25th, the 26th. The moon and those 2 planets, Saturn and Jupiter, form a nice little line over there in the southeast. I'm just going to zoom in a bit here so we can sort of get a slightly better view. There we go. So this is them rising in the southeast around, actually, I guess this is about 1:30 in the morning, so not quite so bad. The next day, oops, that was the wrong one, sorry. The next day, the moon will move over. So this is the morning of the 27th, pardon me. The moon is almost below Saturn here. Oh, gonna sneeze. Excuse me, sorry. And then the following day, the moon will be sort of in between the two. And this is right around full moon as well. Thanks, Petra. Petra says Gesundheit. Oh, and Phil says bless you. Thank you all. Yes. Okay. By the 29th, the moon will have moved on a little bit farther. Oh, and it looks like right now it's just behind a little hill here. I'm just going to zoom out a bit. So by the 29th, the moon will have moved past Jupiter and Saturn over the course of 4 days. They don't move very much, but the moon moves every night and basically passes them. So from the 26th to the 29th, basically the moon will be near those 2 planets. The 2 stars that are brightest, that are closest to the moon on those 4 days, the brighter one's Jupiter, the fainter one's Saturn. So that's how to spot those. And like I say, we're just getting the preview of their summer visibility because they'll be visible pretty much all summer long and into the autumn. Okay. So there's our sky. That's what you can see right now. There aren't any particular events coming up in terms of eclipses or that kind of stuff, none of the big stuff, but that regular progression of the moon going past the planets is pretty cool. But we do have one event coming up. It is on the 20th of June, and it occurs at 10:31 p.m. Central Time. That is what we call the summer solstice. And the people on the radio will tell you every year that's marks the official beginning of summer. Well, kind of. I mean, it depends on what you mean by summer. Astronomically speaking, sure, we can say that that's summer. But I mean, to me, summer's been going for a couple of weeks already as far as the weather goes, right? The weather and the way things feel, the climate, all those things, don't really happen on a fixed schedule that we can predict in advance to the minute. But the solstice is a specific thing that happens that we can predict and we can measure. And so that's the easy thing to sort of talk about. If you ask someone to say when does summer start, they can tell you exactly when the solstice is. But if you ask them when the weather is going to be nice, suddenly nobody wants to commit, right? So all of it comes down to the Earth. This is your home planet. This is where you live, probably most of you. It's where you keep all your stuff. And it is, like all the other planets, a big round ball that flies around the sun, held by gravity. So the Earth orbits the sun once every year. Now, what do we mean by a year? 365 days, right? Well, no. A day is based on how we spin around. The Earth spins around every 24 hours, right? No, the Earth spins around every 24 hours or 23 hours and 56 minutes and 4 seconds. But that would be a really awkward clock to have. So we kind of round it up and we just forget about those extra 4 minutes every day. But if you forget about 4 minutes a day every day, that time starts to build up. At the end of a year, that's a quarter year. At the end of 4 years, or that's a quarter day, pardon me. The end of 4 years, that's a whole day that we have basically dropped behind. So we add an extra day to our calendar every 4 years. We call it a leap year. The Earth's year is also not a perfect number of days. The spinning of the Earth and the going around the sun, they don't work out perfectly. It actually takes about 365 days and 6 hours, as Landon has just said. And so that 6 hours is basically what throws us off a little bit. So as we go around the sun once a year, the Earth, as you've probably heard, is tilted. The North Pole doesn't point straight up and down compared to the plane of our orbit. It points at an angle this way, an angle of 23.5 degrees roughly from the vertical. If you took out a protractor, that would be the number. The North Pole is pointed 23.5 degrees one way and the South Pole comes out, the opposite way. That doesn't spin around as the Earth moves. So for example, I'll try and do it so it matches the diagram here. If the Earth is here and my head is the sun, as I go around the sun, the tilt stays basically pointing the same way and it comes around this way. It's always pointing in that same direction. It always points to the North Star. The North Star is right above the Earth's North Pole. When we look at the sky, the things that we can measure aren't things like when does summer start or things like that. What we can measure is where the sun rises or where the sun sets or how high the sun gets in the sky. So those are the kinds of things that for thousands of years people have tried to keep track of. So here we have the monument of Stonehenge over in England, and there the stones are lined up so that on certain days you can find out where the sun, basically by watching the sunrise, you can figure out where the seasons are. So Stonehenge does this. There are this kind of celestial alignments are built into some of the Mayan pyramids. This is Chichen Itza down in the Mayan Yucatan. And it similarly has on the day of the summer solstice, something that an alignment that basically recreates that isn't seen on other days. Even some of the other monuments that we have today. This is Udina down at the Forks. It's also got alignments to the stars and the solstice and the sunrise and things like that. This is a very, very common thing for people to have done for a long time, because if you know when the sun is rising and setting, if you know what direction it's rising and setting in, you can figure out when the solstices are going to be, and that'll at least give you a warning about when the seasons will change. Here's a diagram that sort of shows that rotation a little bit better. So the axis is always pointing a certain way. And as we go around, so here we are over in the summer, the north part of the Earth, the northern pole, is pointed towards the sun as much as it possibly can be. So what does that really mean? Well, let's go back to our sky. And we're just going to set our time for last winter. Here we go, back to December 21st, and we're just gonna go up to probably the early evening. Here we go, and we're gonna face west, the direction of the sunset. And here's the sky at, let's see, 3:30 p.m. The sun is pretty low in the sky already at 3:30 p.m. And if we let it go a little farther, the sun sets, but it doesn't set directly in the west. Here's the west point. It sets quite a bit south of west. In the wintertime, the sun does not get very high in the sky. It stays low in the south and it sets pretty quickly in the west. Now, if we jump forward 3 months, we'll go to the spring equinox or the vernal equinox, which is March 21st, roughly. Let me just go forward into the year. It doesn't really matter too much. Well, here it is at 4:30. The sun hasn't set yet. The sun has been in the sky longer and will stay up later. When it finally does set, though, it'll be over there in the west, almost perfectly west. So in the course of 3 months, the sunrise and sunset position has moved to being south and then moving more towards the cardinal point, towards the west. Another 3 months forward, we get to, there we go, 7:30 on June the 21st. The sun is still up in the sky. As you know, it stays light very, very late. By the time the sun finally goes down, like 9:30 or so, it's way over here in the northwest. When we're tilted towards the sun in the summer, during the summer solstice, that means that the sun gets very high in our sky. It's like we're leaning into it, and it means it doesn't set until quite late. And when it does set, it's very far north of west. And that extreme point happens on the solstice. If we just let the sun come back here a little bit, if we looked at, a few days before the solstice, we'll just sort of click along a few days, the sun would basically be in a similar kind of position, but it would be setting in a slightly different spot each night. And then the extreme point, that would mark the solstice. And that's when people would have all sorts of festivals and so on. Similarly, the winter solstice would mark the beginning of winter. That would be good to know about, because if you don't have enough food for the winter, you're going to starve to death. Those are the kinds of things that are quite important back in the day. So nowadays, what does the solstice mean? It's kind of just a reminder that all of our seasons, all of our calendar was originally tied to observing the sky. Quite frankly, the summer starting on June the 20th at 10:31 p.m. Central Time is totally irrelevant to almost all of us. I mean, summer starts when the weather is nice, and sometimes it starts 2 or 3 times in a year because we have great weather and then bad weather. But it is a point that we can measure very precisely by observation, and it's a point that we can predict in advance. And so it's useful as sort of that reminder. I think for me, what I've noticed is that the actual seasons have changed quite a bit since I was a kid. I used to think, oh yeah, June 21st, the beginning of summer, that's when it starts getting warmer. Lately, it's getting warmer way before that, it feels. Now, that's not a scientific study, but it certainly feels that the seasons are changing a little bit out of sync with the solstice and things like that. Lou's just asked, are the sunrise positions variable also? Yeah, they're pretty well mirror images. If the sun is setting in the northwest, it will also have risen in the northeast. So it's either always north of the east-west line, or it's always south of the east-west line, depending on whether it's solstice, which solstice it is, the summer solstice or the winter solstice. The worst thing about the solstice is that we really don't get a lot of night sky. So that is a little bit of a problem for star watchers. I was doing I had 2 programs today with grade 1 kids, and they were fantastic. They were super excited and they wanted to know where everything was and stuff like that. And then it came down to saying what time they could go out and see the stars. And I was telling them, well, it doesn't really get dark till about 9:30 or 10. And that was past all their bedtimes. So they were really disappointed. I told them to wait till winter, and then they'd be able to do it, as soon as they got home from school, because it would be darker earlier. And they didn't believe me, but they'll figure it out when we get there. Yeah, Petra says, yeah, past my bedtime too. I totally agree. Yeah, oh, I just see. Hi, Melissa. Um, Thanks for joining us. The In the Mayan city of Tikal, the Tlaloc war serpent rises on the ruins in the shadow of the solstice. Very amazing to witness. So I guess you've been down to the Mayan Riviera, which is awesome. Yeah, basically you get a similar thing here. The shadow of this pyramid. Oh, I have to come back to the picture here. The shadow of this pyramid. This is like a step pyramid, a ziggurat, and so on the solstice day, basically the shadow of the corner is cast onto this rampway, and you basically get this sort of snaky kind of thing going down here. And as the sun moves, that snake looks like it slowly slithers down the side of the pyramid. It must have taken a huge amount of engineering as well as astronomical knowledge to build such a massive building that could have this sort of lighting effect built into it based on the seasons. I mean, we think, oh, the people of the past, they didn't they were not as advanced as we were. They knew a lot of serious stuff. Just they used stone and copper and glass instead of silicon and rubber and plastic. But in terms of intellectually, I think they were on par in a lot of ways with our understanding. Okay. Oh yeah. Yeah. In Guatemala. Oh, in Tikal. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Right. Tikal is much more isolated, I guess, than Chichen Itza is. So yeah, there's a few other things. And Petra says, oh, their calendar stopped at 2012. Right there, the whole Mayan calendar debacle. It was like the Y2K of the ancient world, basically. The idea that the Mayan long count, their calendar, they didn't just have days and weeks and months and years. They had really long time periods, and you would wonder what would ancient people need really long time periods of thousands of years. Like they're thinking ahead that they think they're going to need more than one thousands of years time unit. That's some confidence to think that they can actually exist long enough to need these really long time periods. Anyway, that count, it's like a round kind of thing, and you start here and you go all the way around, and when you get to the top, it doesn't really end. You just go on to the next one. So basically, the Mayan calendar just sort of reset in 2012 or whatever it was. But yeah, they knew math. They knew a lot of great calendar stuff. They were very advanced peoples. Okay. I want to move on because I know we got lots of questions building up there. Mike is recording all the questions. Let us take a look at some of the
Cool space stuff.
So last week we talked about the Chinese space station that is up there. Um, China has launched their own space station called Tianhe, and they have launched a robotic supply vessel called Tiangong, and that one docked automatically. And so this fully stocked space station was up there just waiting for astronauts. Well, the astronauts launched yesterday. 3 astronauts launched from the Jiakon Space Center in China, and this is their pre-flight show picture. What struck me was that all of these guys are basically my age, so I feel a little underachiever at this particular point. They're up for a space station mission, but still pretty cool. They launched. They had a perfectly successful launch in their Shenzhou 12 space capsule. Shenzhou has now docked to the space station. So this is the space station in the middle. This is the supply vessel, which is basically full of food and water and fuel and all the experiments and stuff like that. And this is their spaceship that they will stay on board. And then 3 months later, they'll get back in this and detach and come back to the Earth. But the space station is now going to be got 3 people in it. We can actually see the Chinese space station go over towards the end of the month. It doesn't come up as far north as the International Space Station, so it doesn't come like right overhead, but it does sort of come above the southern horizon. So we'll put some of those times up on the website, and we'll talk about them during the next show, because right around the next show, we should be able to see the Chinese space station. So this is them floating around. Something that I thought was really intelligent in the design of their space station, they've got these great little bars on the ground for them to stick their feet under. It always seems like the astronauts are, floating around on the International Space Station and there's stuff all over the place. This looks really, really neat and tidy. And they've got these great feet bars so that they can have take a picture or do an interview or whatever without floating around upside down. On the other hand, it's kind of cool to see people float upside down. So that's something that is going on. It'll be really exciting to see what happens with the Chinese space program. They've been doing quite a bit of neat stuff. A couple of European astronauts have been training with them, and there's rumors that there may be some other sort of exchange programs with other astronauts. The Russians have said that they will launch a Soyuz spacecraft to go and rendezvous and dock with the Chinese space station. They have a compatible docking system. And so all sorts of cool things going on in space right now, which is great. It's nice to see fun stuff that the astronauts are doing. We also have, there was a spacewalk on the International Space Station just the other day. The space station's starting to get old. And so they are putting in extra solar panels to help generate a little bit more electricity. The old solar panels, they're kind of, past their warranty date, and they're not working as good as they could. Plus, we've, in the 20 years that it's been up there, we've actually, with better solar panels, we've developed better technology. Excuse me, sorry. So they were out trying to install a new set of solar panels. They got partway done on one of them, and then they had a problem with one of the suits, and so had to come inside. So there's another one coming up on the 20th, I think, and they're going to work on that. So neat things going on in space all over the place. Let's see. What else do we have there? So a bunch of questions. Okay, well, Mike, we're going to get to questions in just a second here. So if you can get a few of those things ready, and I'm just going to see if we have. Oh, there we go. Just going to bring our sky back while we get ready for questions. There were lots and lots of questions going by there in the chat. So Mike, why don't you feed me a couple of questions? We'll get to those, and that'll take us out.
Surprisingly, actually, a lot of it was comments, both in Zoom and on Facebook. A lot of people, great discussion about some of the various sites across Earth that sort of tracked the motion of the sun and the moon and the stars. Not just, of course, Stonehenge. You talked about a few down in Central America, but really a lot of just comments. Not seeing too many questions, so I actually just put in the chat on Facebook. If you've got some questions, put them out there. But yeah, it's mostly been people talking, actually.
Well, that's great. Actually, I love the community that we've sort of grown here. There's folks that have been around since January. There's a few folks that have just joined us recently, and everybody's chatting. I love that. We did have a couple of questions from Oakenwald School. We've been getting through those throughout the course of the year. Atticus asks if I have more than one cat. No, I only have the one cat, George, who we've seen in many of the episodes. He also asks, have I ever been to NASA headquarters? I haven't been to the headquarters in Washington, but that's because the Washington thing is just offices. There's nothing cool there, really. I have been to Houston, and I have been to the Kennedy Space Center. I had to go down to Houston to pick up a moon rock. We had a moon rock on exhibit at the Manitoba Museum, and they don't ship it. They don't trust, a courier to do that. You have to go down and pick it up yourself. So I had to fly down to Houston and pick up this moon rock. And while I was there, they said, "Hey, would you like a tour?" And I said, "Yes, I would." And so I got to go in all the places. I'll have to post some of my pictures from that trip. That was a good trip. But then I had to fly back carrying the moon rock, which is always really interesting when you land at the airport and you go to customs and they say, "Do you have anything to declare from the United States?" And I say, "Well, I have this moon rock," and you can just see the customs agent's eyebrow just sort of rise up. And it turned out like I had all the paperwork, everything was all good. And they were like, "Hey, come look at this." But actually, when I was taking it back, the security agent said, "What's in this bag?" And I said, "It's a moon rock." And he just looked at me and he said, okay, you can go. So some people were excited, some people not so much. Cameron asks, how did I decide on the name George? George was the name that came with the cat. I can't claim it at all. It was not anything to do with me. George was a rescue cat. He actually showed up at my parents' house and was homeless. And so they took him in and decided they couldn't keep him. So they came to us. Oh, I just see here in the chat. Yeah, Ben is saying that I think there was a Falcon 9 launch earlier. And yeah, there absolutely was. There was a launch today. I think it was a GPS satellite that was launched. There's our George picture for the day. There are so many launches going on right now. It's kind of hard to keep track. I mean, it's for a while, every space shuttle mission or every rocket launch was a big deal, and I would drop everything and watch it. And now sometimes I don't even see it until it's already over, just because it gets lost in the shuffle. So it's kind of cool that space is becoming very almost routine, but it's still exciting. I mean, the exploration, the spacecraft, things like that. We still got Percy and Ginny up there on Mars. There wasn't anything specific this week that I had to pull out. The big thing was they made a 3D video of one of the helicopter flights, but to see it, you need to have those red and blue 3D glasses. So I couldn't show it on the show because none of you are going to have those ready. But if you have red and blue 3D glasses, go to the Mars NASA website and check out the 3D view of the helicopter flying around. It's actually really, really cool. Okay, one more last call for questions there, Mike. Anything else?
Yeah, we've got a few coming in now. Abby was asking on Zoom, what was the country, this is from a previous episode, where you talked about a country that used sort of the same spacecraft design shape. What country was that, and what are they still using that design?
Yes, so that was Russia or the Soviet Union. They basically had this sort of cylinder with a cone and then another cylinder shape, exactly like the Chinese space station. In fact, the Chinese space station looks basically like a modern version of the very first Russian space station from 1971. So there's certainly a lot of similarity there. And the Shenzhou spacecraft that they put their astronauts in actually looks a whole lot like the Russian Soyuz that is still being flown today. A little bit different. It's kind of like a souped up version. They've got a little bit more space in the front end, but very, very similar design. So that's maybe why, with Russia and China perhaps working together, it kind of makes sense because their spacecraft are very, very compatible. Yeah, and let's see. Oh, hi, Ulrich. Nice to see you.
Actually, let's just cover a question from Facebook because it's been on there for a few minutes now. Jasmina was asking, what is your favorite space station?
Oh, my favorite space station is the very first space station, Salyut 1. We talked about it in an earlier show, I think in April, because it was its 50th anniversary. Salyut 1 was launched 2 months after I was. So it basically was launched right after my birthday. And so that's kind of why I've been interested in it. But I always liked the first things. I mean, the International Space Station is amazing, but there's something kind of frontier-like about being the first person out into space in a space station that maybe doesn't have all the amenities that you want or things like that, but is still cutting edge. So I think Salyut 1, that's my favorite one. That could change. We'll see what China does.
Nice. So Quinn, Malachi, and Doyle on Facebook were asking about Percy and Ginny, and so you gave a little update on that, which was pretty much that there's been nothing new. But anything new with the Chinese rover that's just landed there?
Yeah, they did finally release a few pictures, which we showed, I think, last week, but not a whole lot of information. I mean, the car has driven off of the landing platform and has driven around. It drove out and dropped off a remote camera so that it could basically take selfies of itself. And that was nice because we get this really good view of the spacecrafts sort of sitting beside each other. But really not a whole lot more has come out. They really have been keeping a lot of the stuff, I guess, private. I'm not quite sure why, but their space program is kind of newer, and so maybe they're a little nervous about having something go wrong while people are watching, and so they tend to just release things afterwards. As soon as we get more pictures, I'll put them on the show because they're so uncommon. Same thing with the United Arab Emirates spacecraft. We were so excited about the Al Amal spacecraft that went into orbit around Mars, sent back a couple of pictures. I haven't seen anything else since. I don't even know if it's still functioning. So it's too bad. I mean, we're kind of spoiled. NASA has been really good, and the Canadian Space Agency and folks like that, about live tweeting and this kind of stuff. So I guess we're a little spoiled with that kind of behavior. Okay.
Okay, let's get back to Ulrike's question on Zoom, because she asked a very good question about, with all these satellites up in orbit, and of course we've talked about Starlink in the past, and of course more and more is getting launched. Is there a risk that these satellites or these objects in space could collide?
Yes, absolutely. The short answer is yes. We have to make sure that things aren't going to crash into each other. And that's fine with new satellites that are still functional, but there's a lot of junk up there that has just stopped working and is just still floating around, hasn't fell back to the earth yet. And so there are everything from loose bolts and flecks of paint up to old rocket boosters that are still orbiting the earth. And a number of governments track those. And whenever there's the risk of a collision, they immediately alert the owners of the satellites, whether it's the space station or a satellite from a TV company or a Starlink satellite or whatever, and they get them to try and move. So every once in a while, the space station will actually have to move its orbit because something's going to hit it if they don't move, or something will come close enough that it'd be risky. Nothing has actually hit except I guess a couple of weeks ago, a little piece of something, we don't even know what it was, hit the Canadarm on the International Space Station and drilled a hole right through one side of it. Luckily, it still works. It didn't hit in a critical area, but it's just a reminder that, if that had hit an astronaut that was out on a spacewalk instead of the Canadarm, that would have been a bad day. So there is a lot of junk up there, and it's just getting worse. So unfortunately, we really have to, you and I aren't the ones that are making the mess up there, are we? Really, there's a few companies that are making the mess and not cleaning up after themselves. Kind of like the way it is here on Earth, actually, now that I think about it. Think about that when you're, if you ever get to meet Elon Musk, ask him about stuff like this, because he's one of the most prolific spacecraft launchers, and doesn't seem to care all that much about the cleaning up. Okay, let's see. Lots of stuff coming by there. Do you have any other questions that you're ready with, Mike?
Yeah, I'm just trying to parse through some of the comments here and the questions. There was a question on Facebook about where in Winnipeg is a good spot to do good viewing through a telescope, and luckily we've got some great amateur astronomers on Facebook who are helping to answer that question out
Nice.
For you there, Scott.
Awesome.
But I just like that Tiffany pointed out that after your talk there about satellites, that now we need a segment called Cool Space Junk, not just cool space stuff.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. That's good. Yeah, no, it's a great time. The one thing about the solstice that is nice is that it makes it easier to see satellites. And so now is a good time. If you're out, you'll see lots of satellites going over. And most of the ones that we see with our unaided eye, they're either the Starlink satellites, which are designed for providing internet, or they're spy satellites or military satellites or things like that. Those are the things that we can see easily. All the satellites for like satellite TV are actually quite high and quite faint, so we don't really see them. But you'll see lots of spacecraft crossing the sky if you just go out and look on a good summer night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we are reaching the end of our show here. Do we have Petra asks if I have the location for Elon Musk's parking spot for his Tesla. Are you gonna go have a little impromptu meeting with him or something? Yeah, bring up the space junk. Okay, it's great to chat. Continue the conversation on Facebook and on YouTube. That continues. We always like to get mail, and so you can always email us or send us a, where did my link go? There we go. You can either email us or send us a direct message through social media. Here, I'll get to a nice dark screen. There we go. There's our links. You can always email us at space@manitobamuseum.ca. Thanks again to Steinbach Credit Union for sponsoring the show. There's one more in this season, and then we start season 3 on July the 1st. Thanks for coming out, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. I hope you enjoy what you can see in the sky this week, and we'll be back with you next week. Bye, everyone. Good night.